Hi, this is Lou Alpert. I'm the author of Surrender, a Love Letter to My Daughter, and you're listening to So Booking Cool.
Welcome to So Booking Cool. I'm Jewel B. Over the last 45 years, today's guest has co-owned a women's art gallery, owned a children's book publishing house, founded the Lakewood Service League, and worked as a residential realtor. In 2017, one of her children, Crystal Champ, made headlines when she first surrendered her baby to an officer as a homeless heroin addict. Discussing her new memoir, Surrender, a Love Letter to My Daughter, she is Lou Alpert. Hi, Lou.
Hi, Jewel.
Did you imagine that you would add author to your title at any point in life?
I did. Once upon a time I owned a children's publishing company and wrote some children's books, but I've always written as a way of dealing with things.
Mm-hmm. And I'm sure that a lot of publishers reached out to you for book deals once your daughter's story made headlines, one of your daughters. Can you tell us more on that, Lou?
Well, actually, I wrote the story very quickly, and when I decided that, I wrote the book for healing, and then I sort of was trying to decide if I was going to do anything else with it. And a friend of mine who had actually done my sales and marketing the whole time I owned my children's publishing house, I got in touch with her in New York, and she had her own hybrid publishing company at that point, and I decided to go with her because I knew her. And we sent the book out for an independent review and did some things like that to see if we thought it was marketable. And so I ended up going that route with someone I knew and trusted.
Right. And why was that important to you? Although it might seem like it's obvious and self-explanatory, but Lou, why was it important to you to find a publisher of someone that you knew and someone you felt that you could trust?
I think because I had not shared this story with really anyone. And a few of my close friends knew parts, but no one knew everything. And when the story broke on CNN, I had been managing a very isolated, sort of functional life. But when it hit the news and went all over the place, it became public information. And I found myself in a very vulnerable situation. And so I wanted to be sure I was working with somebody who would be honest with me and that I could trust as I opened myself up, because telling a story like this can be both healing and scary.
Because of your publishing background, did you bring any of your expertise to writing Surrender?
I don't know if I brought I guess I brought my expertise in the sense of I knew I needed a good copy editor, as well as a good publisher. I wrote the book very fast, writing 8-10 hours a day. And so the book is raw. And then I sent it to Crystal because I wanted her to read it. And she, at that point, had told me on numerous occasions she didn't remember anything. And I said, well, it turns out I remember everything, and I have text messages, time, date, dated, and stamped. So she was the one who really encouraged me to move forward with publishing it. She felt like, there aren't a lot of parents who get to tell this story because too many parents lose their children. Mine's alive, which makes me unique in the whole opioid crisis. And so I think that Crystal felt like I could add a unique voice to the problem because there's so many parents dealing with this, and they did what I did. They're doing what I did, which is isolate, not talk about it, not reach out, which makes you go crazy in your own way. And in the end, the codependency is strong. And I was as addicted to Crystal's addiction as she was to heroin. And I found myself just so wrapped up in that spiral.
When you were writing Surrender, was it cathartic at all, or did you find that you had to relive certain moments that were hard for you to get through, you and your family?
It was very cathartic. It was hard to write certain things. It was hard to go back, but part of the process for me was I wanted a truthful accounting of what had happened. And so I went back to, text messages, jail records, medical records. I needed to have a story that made sense to me, that I could look at and and sort of find my way back.
What has been the response to your book so far? What are you noticing a lot of people have been saying?
Most people that I know who know me after they read the book, they just want to hug me.
Mm-hmm.
That's been the reaction. People have been very supportive, very loving. Interesting enough, I have had people call me really who I never knew had addiction problems to talk.
What,
and that's
yeah. Mm-hmm.
That's what I'm hoping the book will do, is it will encourage people to come out of the shadows and talk about it. Because until we start talking about it, first of all, kids who are coming up need to know the devastating place that these drugs take them. These are not drugs you play with. And, heroin took my daughter to the streets for 2.5 years and almost killed her. And if we don't start talking more about the drug and where it can take you, then I don't think we'll find a path to stopping kids. It's infinitely easier to help them before they put a needle in their arms or their neck.
Lou, how did addiction, would you say, from your perspective, how would you say that heroin found its way to your daughter?
Well, my understanding from, and who knows if it's 100% true, is that they had a friend, she and her boyfriend had a friend who was suffering. He was dying, and he had opioids, and they started sharing those just really to comfort him and to hang out with him. And Crystal, I think, has an addictive personality, and she moved quickly to heroin from there. And, she moved quickly to a needle. And she never had any fear of needles, putting them in herself or others. And so she found that she ended up on heroin in sort of just a playful way, the way I think a lot of people end up going there. Mm-hmm. It starts with just thinking they're doing something that's fun and feels good, and then suddenly it has control of them.
What was it like for you? Because Crystal has since recovered, right?
Yeah, she's been in recovery for about 1.5 years.
Mm-hmm. And what has that journey been like at all? Is there anything that you've experienced that mirrors your experiences in your memoir? Or is it very different now?
Well, the memoir goes all the way through her recovery. Part of it was when she got into recovery. I think when Crystal got into rehab and was safely in a place, not living on the streets, I think all of my emotions I'd been holding down for a couple of years exploded to the surface. And I was pretty angry. And I think all my fears I'd been holding down. When you think your child is going to die every minute of every day, you armor up. And I think I was much more prepared for her to die than to live. And so when she got to rehab and was calling me and, saying, "You'd love the oatmeal bar, and I got to go, I have yoga," it was really hard for me to process that. And writing the book helped me process that, of getting to a point of, I had to get through my own emotions and get back in touch with my gratitude and my gratefulness, because it took me a little while. My ego, I took Crystal in. I'm her third mother. I took her when she had just turned 16. And at that time, I remember I took her in, and people would say, I already had 7 kids, and people would say, "Oh, she must be so grateful." And I'd say, "No, she's just as selfish and obnoxious as the rest of my children, so I think we're doing something right." And so I had been that person in her life, and I really believed when she started using heroin that I could fix her. And the first time we put her through detox and rehab, I thought we'd fixed her. And so when she relapsed and ended up on the streets, it was hard. It was hard to accept that I truly had no control. That surrender was what I was going to have to do. And you think you're surrendering, but when you really surrender and recognize that it's other people who have to help your child instead of you, it's a hard pill to swallow sometimes as a parent.
How can families of addicts help support and treat the person going through the addiction and their family?
Well, I think the first thing that everybody who deals with an addict has to be willing to accept is what I did. I did not put the needle in Crystal's arm, and I was never going to be the one to take it out. Only the addict can make that decision, and only the addict can decide when they're going to make that decision. So you can't force them to get clean, and you're begging and, I think one of the worst things that parents do is become a martyr to the kid's addiction, poor pitiful me, my child's a heroin addict. That doesn't do anybody any good. I think the most important things parents do is we try to keep the door open always. Mostly what I did while Crystal was on the streets is I constantly texted. When I went back through the text messages, it became infinitely clear I was as addicted to her addiction as she was to heroin. I was the one texting 4 and 5 phones and calling people to try to find her. And she would get a phone, and then it would be stolen or lost, and then I would mail her another phone. But she was living on the streets. It's not like she had an address. So I had to mail it to a UPS store and pay for them to hold it. And then she would forget, and she wouldn't go pick it up, and they'd mail it back to Dallas. And we used to call it the traveling phone until she would finally get it in her hands. And then she would lose it. So we would go from Crystal 1 to Crystal 2, and we're now on Crystal 10, and we're hoping this is where we'll stay. But we stayed in touch. I constantly told her how I loved her. One of the things I never wavered from, I always loved Crystal. That was never a question. And Crystal always loved me. And that was not a question.
Is it an arduous process for addicts to be able to heal and regain trust with the families again and vice versa?
I still have not seen Crystal since 2015. We are both still healing. She has seen one of her sisters. This process has to be Crystal's, because the most important thing is not my ego, that I get to be in the relationship with my daughter again. The most important thing is that I surrender her and let her find her own way. And she needs to find a life that's sober and where she can find her own way. And so that may or may not involve me. We talk, we text. She's been a huge supporter of this book for me, and she's writing her own. Mm. But she still has healing to do. And I think that we will get there. I like to say life is long. The greatest part of life is that nothing is permanent. And so there will be changes. As parents, we have a tendency to have expectations of what our children will or won't do and will or won't become. And any expectations I have for Crystal's life, they don't exist anymore. Heroin took all that away. But my hope is that now she will exceed all expectations I ever thought of and do something different with her life. She's now helping other addicts. She's working in a sober living, place. We can't go back. We have to go forward, and we have to find a renewed relationship and the truth that exists for both of us.
Lou, why is being an advocate for children so important to you?
I have always worked with children, and I gave birth to 6, and I have a stepdaughter, and I have Crystal, and I had 2 other kids that lived with me for 3 years before they went back to their families. I think children are the most precious thing we have, and we live in a world right now where, I worry about children. I worry about the mother that holds her baby and is looking at her cell phone and not into her child's eyes. So children need our attention, and they need us to listen. And if I've learned nothing else through all of this, it's we need to listen with attention to our children and not talk so much, not lecture so much, but listen. They're just little people.
Lou Alpert, thank you so much for taking the time to chat with So Booking Cool. It was such a pleasure, and I'm so glad that you did publish Surrender. And it is, changing lives. It is helping people. It's adding to the conversation. I am curious to know, how would you feel about your story maybe like hitting the screens one day?
I've just decided I'm going with the flow. I'll go wherever this takes me if I can help other people.
Wow, Lou, I love that. How can people keep up with you and learn more about surrender and how to get it?
The book it's available on Amazon and Barnes & Noble, and I have a website called LouAlpertBooks.com where I post blogs and, more information on, hopefully tools for parents going through this and how to do self-care. And so and there's some videos posted, so that's probably the best place. I have Instagram and all of that, but, mostly I have that because my children run it, because I certainly can't. But but you can reach me at all of those. I'm available at all those places, and I'm happy to engage with people who are going through this process.
Yes, everyone make sure that you stay tuned and keep up with Lou Alpert. Thank you to all the listeners, and until next time, so booking cool.
Hi, this is Lou Alpert. I'm the author of Surrender, A Love Letter to My Daughter, and you're listening to So Booking Cool.